Hello and welcome to Kiki's Chat Show. Today is the 13th of March, 2024, the year of our Lord. And March is dedicated to women. I feel March is it because we have International Women's Day, we have Women's This, Women's That. So the whole of March should be dedicated to women so that we can talk about women's issues. And today we're talking about the mother and daughter bond. So you could be the mother and your daughter, or you could be the daughter and your mother, whichever way it is. And women seem to have a strange relationship with their mothers. The bond is strong, but in it, there is complication, there is perplexing issues, there are all sorts of things. Today, we're going to talk about our mothers or our daughters, whichever one you choose. And we are going to talk about how to maintain a bond if it is strong, how to deal with it if it's not strong, why is it not strong, what can we do to make it better, because the mother, the daughter, is a continuum, and women continue the gift that the universe has given it. We nurture, we produce, we look after, we create, we build, we live, and it continues. There is another mystery that I found out, which Najah is going to tell us. But first, I will let my ladies introduce themselves. Although you know them, you've met them, you've spoken to them, you've heard them, but they can introduce themselves to you again. A short, abridged version. Apia, go.
Hi, greetings everyone. So I'm Akuya Bailey. I'm living in Ghana. I'm a mental health practitioner, and I am absolutely thrilled to be on the show tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Najah, go.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Najah Nyakeo Munini, and I am the host and the producer of the Maito podcast show, which is found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and podcasts everywhere. Now, the Maito podcast show is focused on the African womb man, wherever she is, whether she's on the African continent or whether she's in the diaspora. It's an alternative healing program for the womb. I call us womb men, WOMB men, because we are humans with wombs. So yes, this is who I am, and I'm really excited to be on this show today. Thank you.
Namale, go.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Naamele Asante Amar. Spent most of my life in the UK, a child of Ghana, mother of two precious boys, also a UK employment lawyer, life coach, working mainly with my fellow women, and creator of the Black Women Venting Room and the Black Men Venting Room, providing space for us to honor our emotions in a way to improve our emotional health and reduce physical poor health. And I'm really excited to be talking about this today as a follow-up from what we spoke about in the Black Women Venting Room on Monday. And wow, was that emotional. So thank you for having us here, Kiki's Chat.
It's a pleasure. I am honored to have you. It's great to be speaking to women of your caliber. It always raises, talking to you, listening to you. You do different things, but we're women together. And that's the main thing. And I must say that I did attend the meeting in the venting room on Monday, and we did talk about mothers and daughters. And at one point, the discussion was so emotional, most of us burst into tears. It was that strong. The venting room is actually a place where women talk about their issues freely. It's a free space, and people happily discuss issues freely. And everybody's right, because it is how you think that you bring out your issue. And people, it resonates every time someone says something, it resonates with another person, etc., etc. I'm telling you, it was the most highly charged meeting I've ever attended in the venting room, to the point where, and people, would you believe that me, Kasapoli like myself, I go to these meetings and I never speak. I did speak at that meeting. And I was shocked at myself that I put my hand up, but I had put my hand up already, so I spoke. So this is to show you how emotive, I think the word is emotive, how emotive and how stirring it was on that day. So yeah, ladies, it is great to see you here again, and it's great to have you here to talk about this. Now, because we've had that meeting already, we're just kind of, and we only have an hour here. This is really to not regurgitate, but to, abridge or in an explanatory way, to be able to get our listeners to understand what we're talking about. Today's topic, mothers and daughter bond. We all have mothers, or some of us have daughters. So my first question really is, what is the mother and daughter bond? Shall I ask Ekuya, because she's the one next to me on the screen?
Right. So the mother and daughter bond, in my view, is a connection. So it's all about connecting. And from what I know is that we connect on different levels. So I don't know if everybody understands about the attachment theory when the children are born, the attachment that you have with your parents. In this particular case, when we look at the mother and the daughter, we look at there's physical elements that create that bond as well. And we look at the cells in our bodies. Mothers, when we look at the limbic system within our system of human beings, that system that we have is all to do with the emotions and feelings. So the cells in our bodies are activated by our hormones. So when we have, the way that I can explain it is, we have good hormones and bad hormones. Cortisol, for instance, is a hormone that is released in our bodies into our cells, and I call that like a stress hormone. So we have the makeup of the woman that is similar and going to be continuation with the daughters. So the cells in our bodies, we carry cells in our bodies from our grandparents. And obviously our grandparents carry cells from their grandparents. And that grandparent carries cells from their grandparents. So we have cells that are passed down. So the bond is not just something that is created with relationship. The actual bond is also physical. And so there are things that are passed down from generation to generation. So without going too deep, I think that would be the way that I would explain about the bond. And then obviously the bond is, it manifests itself in different ways according to individuals. And if we take time, we can actually see in our bloodline things that are repeating. And we use things like that. If say if my mother was had depression, it's not necessarily that I would catch it or I would have it or I would go through it. But we can use it as an information so that we can be informed. So the bond is created physically, it's created through relationships, it's created through challenges. And it's something that just goes on and on and on. Myself, my mother is alive. I have a daughter. I have a granddaughter. So there's 4 generations of us alive. So that bond is something that is going all the way from my great grandmother all the way down to my granddaughter. That's the way that I would explain it.
From what from the connection that Equia has explained to us, I know that Najah has a scientific one as well. Najah, do you want to explain it further, a little bit more, before we go into the actual emotional connections of mothers and daughters?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Not like last week. Last week was nasty. So the connection is very scientific, and it goes like this. When a child in the womb, and in this case, we're going to talk about the female child, when she's in the womb, at 22 weeks, she has within her a womb, and that womb is fully developed, and it has ova and it has ovaries. And in those ova are her future babies. So hold that thought. So the baby in the womb has a womb, and that womb has ova. And she's in the womb of her mother. So the mother has a pregnancy with a girl who has a womb. And within that little girl, that baby, is a womb which has ova. Whatever that mom is feeling, whatever is going through her body, and we know now that emotions are saturated within the blood, because the blood is the coding. This is where the DNA is. So whatever the mother is going through, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all that is washed. Her child is washed with whatever she feels. And so is her grandchild. That is why there is usually such a deep connection between the mother, her daughter, and the granddaughter. Those 3 is a very, very strong connection. And as Akuya has said, this is a connection which continues through the bloodline, the maternal bloodline. This is very important to understand, okay? It's very important to understand, because usually we dismiss the maternal and we start focusing on the paternal. Huh? No. It is a very strong connection between the maternal, because it's a blood connection. So, number one, we have to realize this scientifically. Although what has been happening is that this connection, as soon as we are born in this world that we are in today, there's a disconnect, you know. I can see the message over there. I've always experienced a disconnect regarding my relationship with my mother. This is usually what happens from the moment that we're born. We're told, no, we're not connected to our mothers, we're connected to our fathers. We take our father's name, we take it as a surname. We take the father's paternity. We start focusing on our grandmothers on the paternal side, where there's no connection. There's absolutely no connection. And we are forced, there is no connection, okay? Because...
Do you mean there is no biological, I mean, like there is no biological connection? Because there is a connection.
No, there's no connection.
But not...
Let me explain a little bit further. There's the X chromosome and there's the Y chromosome. Now the X chromosome is about 1,000 times bigger than the Y. And you're going to ask why. So the Y chromosome has one thing, has one detail. And that detail is the sex, what is called the sex, the identity of the human being. That. The X has more than 1,000 genes, and the Y has fewer than 80. Why? Because the X is the one which makes up everything. It makes up what? It has instructions for color of the eyes, nose, how the nose forms, how the lips form, how the voice is, everything, everything, apart from the sex. The Y is the one which has the sex, just that. And that is a gene. Okay? Other than that, I'm sorry. There's no connection with the paternal grandmother.
I don't
okay,
know.
over to you before I start a fight.
A lot of women, though, are very fond of their fathers. They see their fathers in a different way, mothers in a different way. And like the listener just said, she's always experienced a disconnect regarding her relationship with her mother. It happens to a lot of people. It does. And one thing I've noticed, though, is there is a disconnect for some until you reach a certain age. And I think Ikuya said something like, there's always a time when the connection comes into being, when a woman begins to understand her mother. Or, in the teenage years, I don't think it works very well. A few women get on very well with their mothers in their teenage years. But I think when you start childbearing, or when you get married, or when you are beginning to get into your own womanhood, you immediately have the connection then comes into being. Is it not? Namele, what is your take on that? On this, the timing of connections when you actually start to realize the importance of your parent, your mother? I think Namele is disconnected from us with the word disconnect.
So I think you're talking about when we realize or coming to the awareness to a certain extent of the importance of our parents. They always have importance as a child that is, dependent on them for survival. And what I want to add is one different aspect that in terms of the different roles that the mother and the father have, maybe from like a creative perspective. So like our mother is the one who teaches us, not with blackboard and chalkboard, but literally teaches us that we are love. As a human being, we are love. And the father is responsible for showing us that how do we be this thing of love out there in the world? So what that means is that our sense of worth, is attached or comes from that relationship with our mother, whereas our sense of importance, significance, the need for acknowledgement comes from our father. So first we get taught our sense of worth, and it is said that, you know, from the age of 0 to 18 months, that really is strict mummy time for all the bonding, the latching, you know, all of that, to go through that process. And daddy time, father time, is more so from kind of 18, you know, post or around toddler or something. And it can be demonstrated by, you know, for those of you who've seen the Lion King, or you're familiar with kind of the outdooring practices that certain tribes and families have. But the point at which you kind of hold the child either up to the sky or up to the outdoors or the family, and it's like, here he is, or here she is, as in, this is love, this is our child. And that is representing the acknowledgement of the child. But before that, we need to have the love of our mother. And Mother Nature tells us that when we don't have, literally, we don't have love of the mother, the child dies. You know, you hear about the children, whether they're a cub or what have you. If the mother rejects the child, literally, the child can die. So whereas a human being may not die, they may feel ousted. They may feel a sense of abandonment, you know, because they've not had, for whatever reason, they've not had that connection. And I think, coming back to both what Najar and I think Akuya mentioned, because that the bond with our mother is not only based on the bond with our mother, it's based on the bonds and the happenings and the experiences of our foremothers, you know, at least 2, 3 back, like Akuya said, her great grandmother, all the way down to her granddaughter. So you've got a lot of influence on this one relationship with your mother. But your relationship with your mother is never just about your relationship with your mother. It's about your relationship with your mother, with your grandmother, your great grandmother, and going down. The short answer to the question you were asking me, therefore, is when we come, for me personally, coming into that awareness of I don't know if it was the importance of my mother, or the things that she said, or I got to understand her more, is when I became a mother. That, for me, that was when it was. Because then when I have to do certain things, I'm thinking, okay, but my mother told me this and this and this. And now I can understand maybe why she took certain decisions when me and my sisters were young, because now I'm having to consider the same decisions for my children. So I think, for me, and probably it's not uncommon, when we get to walk a little shoes, then we think, oh, I understand that now. And the older I get, I more often will go to my mum and say that, oh yeah, mum, you're right, or I understand that now. Whereas before, it would be rebellion, you know, like, oh, what are you talking about? Not that you say that to her, but you're thinking, what are you talking about? It's very humbling once you are actually a mother and you're now thinking about all the things your mother told you. So that's what I'd say.
Wow. So now we understand in different ways that there is an initial bond with your mother. It's mental, it's emotional, it's everything. And then as you grow, some bonds, that bond is strong and it's powerful, but then that bond could be a little bit diluted until you reach a certain state. There are some people whose bonds never break because they are like their mothers and they're with their mothers all the time and they understand their mothers. And there are some women actually who mother their mothers.
Hmm.
Do you see? But let me tell you my one, and then we can analyze it, or listeners, you can analyze it for me. Because mine, I didn't even say it in our meeting that day, but let me tell you mine. When I was born in a different country, far away. And as a toddler, I then was taken to my paternal aunt. This is the matriarch of my father's line, with the sister, the elder sister. And so that was my formative years. I was not with my mother, me, and I am the only girl at the time. And I seriously bonded with my aunt. Years down the line, I was taken back to my parents, my sibling. By then I had about 2 siblings as well, and I could not bond with my mother. I found her ways very different from my aunt. Now, I was not difficult. I was just, because my aunt was a very calm, very well behaved child, person, and I had taken on her manner and the way that she viewed things. So I spent a lot of time just looking at my mother. I just found her very strange. Now, my mother, strangely enough, is just like me. She is she's an extrovert. She's a happy person. She likes to dance and play music. My father will be sitting down, she would get him up, they'd play some music. That's all. Whereas my aunt was more calming and more, she wasn't any of that. So it was a new thing for me to keep watching. But the person that I fell in love with at once was my grandmother. My maternal grandmother it was a very strange thing. As a baby, when I was taken to Ghana and I was with her, I was with my auntie, my father's sister, my grandmother would come and visit. And I was told that on the first day that she saw me and I saw her, it was as if I was seeing somebody I knew. I'd never seen her before. And we bonded. And every time she would come and visit me, I was a baby. I didn't have much, but I had a lot of things to try and say to her. And this carried on until she died. Our bond was very strong. But even so, I'd met my great grandmother as well. And them, I had no problem with them at all. I was chatting. But whenever I was with my mother, it was more of like I was looking, and she would say it. She would tell her mother or her sisters, which she had 10 million of, that this child is always looking at me in a very strange way. But I don't know whether I was looking at her because I was learning something remote, though. I was learning her ways. But the one thing is, I would be so sad if I had to stay over for more than a week. I had to go back to my aunt. That was my home. And this carried on for years until my aunt died. And when she died, I kind of felt like, oh my God, so what am I going to do now? And I had my mother. I had my mother, I had my father, I had my whole family. And yet I was so wrenched from my people. Now, I don't know how anyone can analyze this for me, but it has stayed with me and I am still with it up till today. It was this thing where, and in fact, I was in secondary school, boarding school, when my aunt died, and I was wrecked. And it changed my whole outlook, and it forced me to now accept that these people were my parents. although I was very close to my dad, I didn't have any problem with him at all. So years down the line, and I've never told anyone this. Nobody knows. I think my friend, well, a few of my friends know this, and most of my cousins know this, but they do not know the depth of emotion that I carried with this, displacement. Now I'm calling it a display. It wasn't a displacement. It was just, this was my life, and these people were different. And as in my teen, as I was growing up, I realized my mother and I don't know how to describe it, because we like the same things. Now, I live here, she lives in Ghana. When she came, we would plan the things we would do. We would do things together. We would shop for bras. We would do girly things. We talk about things. I told her a lot of things. And I even told her things she didn't want to hear, that she couldn't deal with. I was that vicious. I told her things that people don't tell their mothers. I would tell her them. But you see, and she would suffer to listen, to accept, to understand me. Whereas I would say the same things to my grandmother, and we would talk about it. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. My grandmother and I would analyze my things. We would, so my issue, and I'm telling the whole world, which is something I wouldn't tell one person, and here I am telling everyone on my show. But it is to give you this thing that here it is. People say they have these bonds, no. It took me years to create or accept or even identify the bond. And everything we did a lot of, we cooked together, but it took me a long time for it to become natural. Whereas with my grandmother, who, and even my great grandmother, who I met and she lived for many years, and we would make jokes and talk about things freely, and I would come and tell her what's going on in the world, and there was no problem. So do you see? And yet I was my mother's right-hand woman all through my life. Even when I was going and coming and going and coming, it was automatic. She taught me how to cook her way. My aunt was teaching me how to bake her way. It was very strange. So here I am, specimen. So please analyze me.
Can I just say that context, context is very important. Where we are, where we do things. And also, it's not just about context. And when you look at the grandmother to the daughter, the grandmother's in a different season of her life. She's had so much experience. She's had her own experience of being a daughter. She's had her experience of being a mother. And then she's been grandmother. And usually as well, you can look at the fact that the grandmother would have more time on her hands to relate to you, to give to you, to answer you. And there's something about a grandmother, if I talk personally, the relationship is different as a grandmother than it is to your daughter. The responsibility is completely different because you are responsible. I was totally and solely responsible for my daughter. I'm not solely and totally responsible for my grandchildren. So my granddaughter, it's a different, you can use the word pressure, and responsibility comes with a lot of things. And so when you talk about having a real good relationship with your grandmother, when you look at the mother-daughter bond, you can have your daughter being in different seasons in her life. You have the grandmother being in different seasons in her life. So we have experience that we can offer as a grandmother that we couldn't offer when we were a mother. And when you talk about your mother being in Ghana and you being in a different country, again, context. The mothers in Ghana are different and they behave different. They've had different experience. They've had different challenges to the mothers, say, for instance, in the West. So context is going to bring a different energy. It informs us in a completely different way. And when we think about bonding and when we think about attachment, your early attachment with one caregiver, we talk about the mother-daughter bond. I have daughters in Ghana that are not physically, they didn't come from me, but we have bonded and I feel responsible for them. And they look to me as if I was their mother. So you have those different attachments, those different ways of relating, which come with different responsibilities. I'm in a different season of my life. I have more time. I'm not working full time. I have different experience that I can offer. When I, as a mother, it's a, you know, the earth is our school. We're all here on earth and we're learning all the time. So the earth is our school. As parents, we didn't have a course. We didn't have something that we could study in the classroom to say, this is how we do it. We learn from either our sisters or we learn from parents, we learn from families, we learn from whoever we learn from. But it's not about, I don't see things as getting it right and wrong. I feel that people do the best that they can with what they have at any given time. So you experience different bonding and different attachments according to the different seasons people were in and according to different contexts. And then there is the thing about the individual. As individuals, how do we look after ourselves? Because the best way that we look after ourselves is the best way that we can actually look after somebody else. And again, we can only do the best that we can with what we have. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It makes sense. It makes sense. Now, so moving away from me now. Oh, unless you want to analyze me a little bit more. Do you?
I think Akuya's covered a lot, and I think we've said it in a roundabout way. What your story makes me remember is that the friends who equally, they have such a strong bond with their grandmother, but with the mother, it's almost as far as, you know, it's like they're their arch nemesis. I was very close to my maternal grandmother. When I think about it, I didn't really spend that much time with her. However, the time I did spend with her, it was my formative years. I was in Ghana at 6 months. You know, I came back a bit later with my sister, and I think we're here for maybe 18 months. So I had those that early memories, those early memories and experiences with her. And then she was in the UK, I think maybe just for a year with us. But when she left us, it's almost as if my mother left me. Do you know what I mean? She was that close to me, and I would say, hands down, she is, if not the sole reason, she is the main reason I have come back to Ghana. You know, I'm very connected to her. I speak to her. You know, she's very much with me. Other people in other spaces would ask me, "Oh, you know, did you have a grandmother who liked purple or something?" I'm like, it's that grandmother, you know, like they can see that she's here, she's with me, you know. And it reminds me of what Najjar was telling us in terms of the fact that whether she said it in those words, what she was telling us is that the fact that when our mother, we're carrying a daughter, that daughter, we've carried her for 22 weeks. So she now has her fully equipped womb, you know, with all her ova. So our grandmothers carry us in their wombs, you know, so that the connection there also will be there. So for you, it's not at all surprising to me that you were so close to your grandmother, even though it may not be that you spent much time with her young. What we don't know, I would look at what was going on with her when she conceived your mother. And then at that time, when your mother was only 22 weeks old in her womb, what was going on? Because that would then inform something about what was happening with you. And who knows, maybe the reason why it was that you ended up going to your aunt. But unfortunately, there are many of our sisters who do not have good relationships with their mothers at all. And it can be painful when you think, oh, but with the grandmother, it's lovely. What happened? Why did this one skip? So yeah, that's what I'd say about you. And I've indirectly spoken about me. I was always much closer to my maternal mother, and I still am, than I was to my paternal grandmother, my
Grandmother.
maternal grandmother, than my paternal grandmother. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that I didn't have a good relationship with my mother. My mother saved me
I
from a
know.
lot of things. My mother is, she was but we had a lot of.
It's the bonds you're talking
I
about, isn't it?
I I was the problem really, because I was always kind
You
of
were not
like,
a problem.
no. It's wording. I was the one who was always. I had somebody else. So until I needed her, it was a very bizarre. This is why I'm saying I am. If we want to talk about bonding and we want to talk about, I am a test case, because it is not that we had a bad relationship. I can never say that. I cannot attest to it. She was very good, and she is, she has been there for me, and she's done things many mothers wouldn't do for their children. My mother is the example of powerful. However, our relationship was something that was built over time. Over time. So because I had other, relationships. I
Caregivers.
was somewhere else. Totally. The body was
Mhm.
elsewhere, that sort of
Context.
thing. So where it was automatic for me to bond with my maternal grandmother and great grandmother, it was easy. And it wasn't to the point where I used to test her, and I used to really be on her wits. But she was so strong that she never, it's bizarre. I am just blessed. I am just blessed because for me, mine, I was her test. Hmm. And I can see that you guys can't even analyze the whole thing. So we shall move swiftly on. My somebody saying my mother was majestic, she was amazing, because also she did a lot of psychology. She was a teacher, she was all sorts of things. So for her, she knew, or maybe she knew that
But
she
can
had to be a certain way with me,
but can I
because
just
she
say,
knew
sorry to
and I was
interrupt
with
you.
somebody else.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you said earlier that you're very similar to your mother. Is
Yeah,
that right? Yeah. So you were her
yeah.
mirror. You were her mirror. Okay. So here she has given birth to a daughter who is her mirror. And that we don't know what that means to her. What did she think of herself as a person? Because now what she thought of herself, she may be looking at it in you. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It
So there
does.
is a
It makes sense.
so there's a possibility that how she felt about herself at the time of having you, it was going to be mirrored. And so it's not like, you see, the relationship was different. I don't see the relationship as bad or anything like that. I think the
No, no, no.
relationships you had, exactly. So the relationship was different. You understand what I'm saying? But I think at that
Yeah,
time when you came, what did you represent for her? Only she would be able to say that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it shows, so after the meeting, I'm digressing a little bit, but after the meeting, I did think deeply about me, my life, where, the places, how my life has gone, and all of that. And I thought she must have been very strong, because I am very strong-willed. But it washes over her head. See, now when I look at it, all the things, and the things I could tell her, which I knew, this woman, this Christian woman, but fine, she would take it in. If I go and tell my grandmother the same thing, she will say, hey, let's pray over it, let's that sort of thing. Whereas my mother would look at me quietly and move on. We would move on. It was very strange. But there you go. I mean, life is like that, and everybody has different ways in which they deal with their mother. So my one is past. Let's carry on with other issues. For example, as Naamele said, some mothers had terrible relationships with their daughters. And I mean, as we're speeding on, the hour is about to be up. I can tell you that it could be boundaries, it could be strictness, it could be all sorts of things. It could even be generational, because not when I say generation, the mother could be from a different generation. It could be religion. The daughter could be in all sorts of reasons. The question to you, though, is, and this is to Najar, the question is, how do you deal with a strange relationship if the mother and the daughter are having problems? I don't, how would you deal with it?
Okay, this is a two-sided question because let me start with the daughter. The daughter who is having an issue with her mother. It begins with the daughter addressing what the issues are, because most of the time when a woman in her own right is not getting along with anyone, it means that she has to check herself first, and she has to begin to counsel herself, and if she cannot counsel herself, to seek counsel from somebody else, like Naameli, for example, or from Sister Akuya. This is very important because most of the time when we fight somebody else, we're not fighting that person, we're actually fighting whatever it is that we see of ourselves in that person. So once we get to understand ourselves, once we begin to love ourselves and we begin to nurture ourselves, once we begin to learn how to control our emotions and become more patient with ourselves and more forgiving of ourselves, then we are now able to have a better relationship with the next person or whoever it is that we have a situation with. In this case, the mother. So I'm speaking a lot in truth for myself also, because there was a time that there was a disconnect between myself and my mother. There is no longer a disconnect now, at least not on my side. Maybe she says there's a disconnect on her side, but on my side, there's no longer a disconnect. Why? Because I looked at the issues which were disturbing me, and I learned how to heal my inner child. Much of the reason why we have issues with our mothers is because we think that they, at some point in our childhood, when they were mothered us unfairly. And we cannot see clearly because we were looking as a child does. So the onus is up to us as we grow older to look at our inner child and to forgive our inner child for expecting more from our mothers. Does that make sense? Then there is the mother and the relationship with her daughter. So that's now another generation. Now we're going backwards. Or is it forwards? We're going forwards. So here is where the mother needs to take herself at her age and be the bigger person. She needs to be the adult. She needs to be the adult. Because we cannot take our burdens and place them on our children. We cannot take our responsibilities and place them on our children. And a lot of the time, especially in Africa, we do that. We expect our daughters to be little mothers to the rest of our children, especially the girls, to do a lot of mothering, you know, to tend to, especially the firstborn daughters. We tend to heap a whole load of responsibilities on them, which are not put on other daughters. So we as mothers now, and in this generation, especially in this generation, so I'm talking to mothers today, just have to grow up. We just have to grow up and not raise our children the way we were raised. And that's another thing. We cannot, and we're not supposed to, raise our children the way we were raised. No, that's wrong. Because not only is it wrong, it is in conflict. Because they don't understand our times. How can they? We are 20 years, 25 years, 30 years older than them. So we already have, things happened in our time which they have completely no understanding of. So how can we even dare to tell them that you should do this according to how I was raised? It, it just doesn't make sense. But we do this over and over again. We keep saying, in my time, children were like this. In my time, in my time. Well, that time has gone. It's gone. It's in the past. We are in the
But
future
sometimes, no, but Naja, regarding that, that's what you know. As a parent, that is what you know. In your time, this is what was happening. In my time, people were respected their elders. In my time, etc., etc. Example. So if you want your child to grow up respectful and which is the basic
But
things
they
of
don't,
life.
but they have no idea. They have no idea. Because you're telling them something that they cannot even begin to fathom it because they have not seen it. This is why I say that it is a mistake. You cannot say in our time, because the child will be there like, what time? What are you talking about? It is up to us as parents to say what it is that we expect the child to do, not to allude to some thing which they have never ever seen or never ever heard. So when you start a sentence with, but in my time we used to do like this, the child will be there, 2 years old, wondering, what is this time? What are you talking about? But if you tell the child, I expect you to greet me with a soft voice. Say to me, hello, mommy, not hello, mommy, then the child will understand. Okay? But when you allude to something which they can't, they have there's no criteria there. And that is where a lot of mothering goes wrong, because we expect them to understand. How can they understand? They were never there. So
I think
and at the
mothers
same time,
basically
mm-hmm,
at the same time,
mm-hmm, at the same time, we have to agree, and I think this is, we have a parenting group with another lady, and the parenting group has over 1,000 parents, women as well, and it is a learning process. It is a relearning process, because we were never taught how to parent as mothers. We were never told as a mother, this is what, we never went to school to learn physics. We learned how to dissect a frog. Don't ask me why. We learned how far the earth is from the moon. I don't know what it has to do with anything. We learned all kinds of things, but we never learned how to raise our children. There were no parenting classes. The only classes that I remember going for were those birthing classes. Oh, and that was when I was pregnant. Then suddenly there was this panic about, oh, she doesn't know how to give birth. So you have to go for all these birthing classes. That was it, right? But there was nothing about this is how to talk to a child. This is how to raise a child. The book is thrown at you. You do it how you want to do it. Yeah? And then you find out
I
that you
don't
don't
want
know how to
to
do it.
I don't want to interrupt, but we
Yeah.
only have 5 minutes left. So everyone, each one should tell me how they feel. You know, we always have a short, and as we're building into it, then the hour is up. So Namele,
Next show.
what is your give me a 1 minute because we only have 4 minutes left. 1 minute view on the mother-daughter bond, the bond.
Akuya has already said it. We're on this planet to learn and live lessons. Our mother is the first person who shows us, it's our reflection. We've come, we're a girl, she's a woman. She's the first, the prototype. We learn a lot from her about how to be us until whilst we're finding our way to be the individual us. When it comes to these disputes or disagreements and things, ultimately, the question that I would ask, because there's usually a conflict between, say, I'm the child, I'm in pain, you're not hearing my pain, and you're not apologizing. How dare you? You know, and the mother is in that the opposite of what Najat was saying, can be in the space where, but I don't understand like where you're coming from. And I think the question you asked earlier, Auntie Candy, about how do we deal with those things, time, much patience is needed and time. Sometimes we try to force these things and fix them, but there's time for what Najjar was saying, that the daughter needs to introspect and look at what's going on for her. And also at that when she's over or a bit further with that pain, to think, okay, well, where's her mother coming from? And the mother to do the same. The last thing I say is that the question I'd ask is, with all the things that you think may be wrong with your mother, think, who would you be today if she was not who she was?
Exactly.
I'll leave you with that.
That's powerful. I can't even ask
Exactly.
I can't ask anyone any more questions because I only have 2 minutes. But I think in summary, the mother-daughter bond is a bond that remains unbroken, growing stronger and more nuanced with time. And time is something that you said. And then from the moment a daughter is born, she begins to absorb the world around her. Her mother is the nurturer. And then as she grows and is coming into herself, her mother sometimes becomes her punch, the boxing punching, so that's what, and then it gets to a point where you suddenly realize that your mother is your buffer. Now around that there are other emotions, there are other things. Not all mothers are the same. Mothers are learning. Somebody said our mothers were grappling with emerging independence countries, being wife to young pampered men, and they were also leaders in their own professions. They stayed in fretful marriages and tried to make it work. And I think that's what it is. So if you are in that mold, if you are, things are happening, a lot of us, our mothers worked. My mother worked. She was headmistress, was this, that, and the other. She was baking, cooking, rushing around, and yet looking after us, and doing all sorts of things which other men wouldn't let their wives do. My mother was driving, going, coming, So it was a whole huge thing at the time when we had just got independence and life was going on and blah, 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 blah. And I think we're not kind to our mothers until we realize our mistake. I think that we all need to look back, because if you haven't got a good relationship with your mother, you will not have a good relationship with your daughter. And this is a proverb, though, from my tribe. it depending on how you are with your mother is how you're going to be with your. Luckily for me, I don't have any daughters. Every daughter that I have is somebody else's child that I've borrowed, stolen, or cajoled and brought into my space. But I think this has been a good show because we've actually thrashed out a few things. And I think we have to do this again because we haven't even got to the crux of it. We're being polite about it. We haven't got to the, and in an hour, everybody's said a few things and boom, time has gone.
Yeah.
And so thank you very much for coming on to the show. I am always honored and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I love it when you come. Everybody says their own thing. We have scientific, we have emotional, we have all sorts of thrashing out. I've told you my biggest secret. Not a lot of people know. They just see me. I live with my, nobody. I've just had a blissful childhood and blah blah blah. But there was so much behind it, so much behind it. And I think if my mother wasn't the human being she was, she would have thrown me away. She didn't. And I cry every day because she's not here anymore. And I miss her. I miss my grandma. I miss my great grandma. I'm surrounded by women and, the whole thing. So I'm surrounded by ghosts and things, which is pushing me forward. And, make of it what you will from what I've said. But mother's mother. And, but they're human beings. Don't forget that mothers are human beings. They have feelings, they have emotion. Some of us don't really see until it's too late that our mothers have feelings, they have emotions, they make mistakes. All of this is inside the bowl. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, listeners, for staying and joining in this amazing mother-daughter. It can never be analyzed. This is my view, because you people couldn't analyze my relationship. You couldn't. So I think the mother-daughter bond is one big issue which we shall carry on till infinity and beyond. Thank you so much for coming onto Kiki's chat. Thank you for making this chat. It went just like that. And I wish we could carry on, but I can't. Good night, people. Good night, listeners. Thank you very much. I'm learning to say thank you by like doing this, Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Yes.